Hi, I'm Robbie Koenig, and you're listening to the Functional Tennis Podcast with fabulous Fabio.
Welcome to the Functional Tennis Podcast. I'm super excited to be chatting to the legendary tennis commentator, Robbie Koenig. You may recognize Robbie from these legendary commentary quotes.
Oh, that's outrageous. The guy is so talented, it's beyond a joke.
Wow, what an angle. There's a ticket to the party.
That is phenomenal, dog. That's what that is. Oh, stop it.
Robbie tells us all about his tennis days as a pro, how he became a commentator, and also life as a commentator over the past 16 years. I really enjoyed this chat. It was loads of fun, got some great stories, and the odd bit of tennis advice in there. Thank you very much for that, Robbie. Before we get started, a shout out to our podcast sponsors, Slinger. They make the awesome Slinger bag, which I've mentioned plenty of times here. If you head over to slingerbag.com, you can get all the information there. They're shipping to more countries than ever now. But here we go. Let's start chatting to Robbie. How are you? And welcome to the Functional Tennis Podcast. Pleasure to have you on.
Thanks, Fabio. I've been listening to some of your chats over the last few months. I've never actually been a big podcast guy until we started to go into these lockdown scenarios. So COVID has inadvertently introduced me to podcasts over the last 9 or 10 months.
Nice. Well, we did get on the podcast bandwagon before COVID. We're on since 2019, so we didn't jump on when a lot of others jumped on, but no, the content's been great. And I must say thank you very much for your mentions on live TV regarding the Nick Kish, the Turner Grip episode, which was great. You enjoyed that one?
I certainly did. And it's nuances like that within the sport that I found so fascinating. Obviously, when we're around it so much, I don't want to sound arrogant that we kind of know most of the stuff that we've heard on podcasts. So it's so refreshing when you come across something that is, a lot more left field and a story that you've never heard before. And of course, Turner Grips. I grew up with Turner Grips. I'm older than most of these youngsters these days. Pete Sampras was the same age as me, my ilk. And watching him do his Turner Grips as a youngster in South Africa, they were the grip to have. And the whole story behind it and the company was absolutely fascinating. I love nuggets of information like that, and I'm so glad you brought it to us.
I know, no, it's great. It was a good story to tell. And the guys have sold a lot of Turner Grips, and it's kind of funny. Either love Turner or you hate Turner. So you're either a white Wilson man or you're a blue Turner person, and you're definitely a blue Turner person.
Actually, I wasn't. I couldn't afford Turner Grips back in the day.
Oh, okay.
So I actually never played with them. And consequently, I used to get sponsored by Wilson. And it was only recently that, in relative terms, that they brought out the white grip. But I used to play with anything else that I could afford. You use the grip 4 ways. I hope you realize that as well. So you put the grip on and then you switch it around so that the top half of the grip then becomes the bottom. And then once that's worn out, you switch the grip over and then you use the backside, top and bottom. So when you're on a tight budget playing, satellites back in the day and you're from South Africa, you maximize the time span of a grip. And Turners were way out of my budget.
Oh, wow. I didn't know the 4-way. It's the first time I've ever heard about using the 4-ways. That's interesting. That is I'll put that in the cost saving section of the futures traveling player.
I tell you, Fabio, before we go on, I've got one more of those, and I've got to give credit to Kevin Elliott, who was obviously another top player, Grand Slam doubles champion from South Africa, and that was the old hose pipe that we used to use on our shoes. So because we used to drag our feet so much when we served, and the courts that we played at Westridge Park in South Africa, anybody who's been there will know that's like playing on coarse sandpaper. We used to wear out these shoes so quickly, Fabio, that we would get a hole just in the top of the shoe. And we'd get a piece of hose pipe and we'd cut about an inch long, and then we'd cut it 2 ways across the top, so you've just got this curved piece left. And that would fit perfectly around the toe of the shoe. We'd add super glue on the corners, and you'd get about 2 or 3 days out of that before it wore through. But of course, you've got a meter of hose pipe. So over the course of a month, that meter of hose pipe would basically save your shoes for another month.
Wow, God, that's another tip. I can't see the cool kids using that these days.
Definitely not. Believe it or not, it was pretty cool at the time as a cost saver. But yeah, my own kids even look at me sideways these days.
Yeah, it's always when your parents tell you something, it's always about something cost saving measure for something. And you just hide from the advice until you're older. And then you say, God, that was some great advice my parents were giving me.
Too true.
Was there any Irish players around when you were in the early satellite tour? Owen Casey ring a bell at all?
There certainly was. The legendary Owen Casey was a good friend of mine. So we crossed paths a couple of times. I remember playing the Challenger in Dublin one year when I first came across him. And we ended up hitting a lot of balls together and practicing quite a bit that week, and some good memories. I think I made semis or finals there. So Ireland does hold some good memories in my mind. I love the people. I think you guys have got the coolest accent in the world. So that's the only reason I agreed to do this podcast with you.
Thanks a lot. And I must tell Owen owns the pro in my club. So, and he used to be an old coach of mine when I was a kid. So I'll tell him, I'll forward this podcast onto when it goes live and give him something to listen to now that he's not on court in lockdown. But speaking of lockdown I want to hear a bit more about your tennis career and then how you moved into commentary. But before we get to that, how is quarantine in Australia treating you?
It's fine, eh? No complaints from my side. I've got into a good routine. First couple of days I had a bit of jet lag, but I didn't even bother trying to rectify it because there was no urgency. So I just slept as much as I could, got as many hours on the pillow as possible. And then just the last couple of days, a bit more normality. I'm coming up for halfway now. Tomorrow morning, my time, it's 7 p.m. in the evening here on Friday. So tomorrow morning is my start of my 8th day. So yeah, kind of over the hump, Fabio. Tennis Australia, you cannot believe the efforts to which they've gone. I've got a bike in my room. One of the stationary bikes. They sent us some bands. We get food packages every other day with snacks and stuff over and above the meals that we get. And I've just got myself into a good routine, getting up relatively late. And yeah, just doing some exercise, then doing some work, doing my prep for the ATP Cup and the Australian Open. And doing some historical work as well. It gives me a chance to watch a lot more video footage. I don't like to watch too much tennis when I'm at home and I've got time off. As much as I love this game and I absolutely adore it, sometimes I do like to get away from it. I will watch it if it's on TV, but it's nice to go and do some like specific analysis. So these sort of opportunities allow for that. And I'm not a big movie watcher, and I'm doing a fair bit of that too. Watching some documentaries. I love the documentaries. I've just watched a Target documentary. I can recommend that if you haven't seen that. And this is a guy who never watches Formula One. I'm talking about never. And this Drive to Survive on Netflix.
Oh.
I don't know if you've seen that. I mean, I'm captivated by it.
I have. It's really good. I was a big Formula One fan. Would have been big in my house. They're big Ferrari heads growing up in an Italian family. And so it was always Formula One on the Sunday. But past few years I lost interest. But the Drive to Survive has definitely brought back the interest, and just seeing what goes on, the little battles going on all over the place is madness. Like, really good show. Totally.
And I had no idea about that. I could probably name 1 or 2 drivers in Formula One. I mean, after watching the first series, I know a whole lot more about it and appreciate the sport a lot more. And it's amazing what a bit of understanding about a sport can do for you, right?
Oh, totally. Like, it got me back into it. And the second series is brilliant as well. Another great show that I just came across recently for those listening, and maybe for you, is the Tottenham Hotspur show. I'm not sure the name. It's on Amazon Prime, who you know well, but it really gives you a good insight on what goes on behind a football team. I'm not sure. Have you seen that one?
I have. I thoroughly enjoyed all of those on Amazon Prime. I'm obviously a big rugby fan as well, so the All Blacks documentary was fantastic. South Africa's just brought out a great movie about the World Cup winning team. So, yeah, that's where I'll absorb a lot of my energies during this quarantine time.
Yeah, no, they're really good. And tell me, you say you do some historical tennis analysis. What exactly are you doing when you're looking back at some matches?
So the biggest thing is like looking for plot points in matches so that when I'm commentating, I can be very specific about a match, let's say between, let's say we're looking back at the 2020 ATP Cup last year, because the ATP Cup's coming up, in about a week's time. And, I'm just reminding myself about, say, Kyrgios versus Tsitsipas match when they played last year, 3 tiebreaker sets. And I don't know if you remember the shot that Nick hit on match point, right? It was an unbelievable backhand return winner down the line in the 3rd set tiebreaker to clinch it for Australia. So when you can give detail to commentary like that, I think it helps bring back the memory of the viewer if they don't remember it. And I think it just shows specific knowledge from my side. So, I'll make notes about that. Nadal versus Djokovic, for example, in the finals. I've written here 5-all second set, 15-40, that volley, which was like a little John Fitzgerald topspin volley winner that he hit in the corner to save break point there. I mean, it was the most ridiculous shot you've ever seen. And again, so it's stuff like that. Make the notes, keep it in the memory bank so that if I can have an opportunity to recall a moment like that and make it relevant to a match that, say, Rafa is playing in front of me, it just creates better storytelling.
I always did wonder how you guys could remember all that information, because you come out with some great nuggets from time to time and you're like, oh, now I remember. So yeah, you're hitting the nail on the hammer there. It does allow then the viewer to go, God, I remember that shot now. But until you said it, you wouldn't have remembered. So a great job. A lot of research. A lot of research to be done. A lot of great matches the past few years to watch. So I'm sure you're kept busy. But before we talk about commentary, let's go back to your tennis career. As you did mention to me the other day, we were joking. You said you got a bike. I thought only the players got bikes. I didn't know everybody got bikes. So, and you said, I was a player. Tell me more about your early days as a player.
Sure, man. First and foremost, I love this game so much. I really do. And I was never a standout junior, especially until about the age of 15. I was pretty average within my county or state, as they would say in Europe or America, province in South Africa. And then things started to change a bit. For the first time, I discovered a little bit of fitness. I do driveway sprints. I do side to side on our veranda at home. And I did that for about 3 weeks. And I played 2 quite big junior tournaments in South Africa. And I remember losing in the final of one, having match points. And then I drove from Joburg down to Durban, my hometown, and won the next one, beating some good players in the quarter semis and finals. And especially in the quarterfinals, I beat one of the top guys in the country, someone who I'd never beaten before. And the penny dropped, hey, Fabio. If I do a little bit of fitness, gee whiz, it's made a big difference in my game. So how's about I start doing a bit more of this? And I improved quite a bit from like 15 to 18. I became one of the top 4 or 5 players in the country, but still never stand out. I was the same vintage as Wayne Ferreira. Obviously, we know how good Wayne was, what a great top 10er he was for about 10 years. Grant Stafford was another name, top 50 player for many years. Marcus Andruska, I want to say career high of maybe 30 in the world. And then there was myself and Kevin Elliott and a few other guys. And right around the time I was thinking of going pro, I also had an option to go to university. I had two offers from University of Miami and from, having a brain cramp here, the one in Malibu in California. And anyway, I chose not to go to college in the States, and I went pro only because the South African Tennis Federation had an additional sponsor, and it was always like the top 4 guys who traveled. Now suddenly they added another 4 onto the back of that, and I decided, okay, Pepperdine, that was the name of the university.
Nice, good college.
And I went pro, and it was pretty good. The first couple of years, I did decently in singles and especially in doubles, which meant that my parents didn't have to fork out much money for me to travel back in those days. The coach was provided by the federation, And, you know, in the satellites, we were making enough money every week basically to break even. So that's how things went for me. And then in 1992, the single started to go well. I qualified at a couple of tour events in the US summer. I think I made third round at Washington, beat some top 50, top 100 guys in that tournament. And things were going swimmingly. And then I got a knee injury and I ended up being out of the sport midway through 93, and I ended up being out for almost a year, 2 back-to-back operations. Then I came back, tried to play more singles, but never really had the game to be a consistent top 100 player. And it just happened one year at the US Open, 1997. And it's probably quite apt that I mentioned Craig Tiley at this point, given I'm in Australia. Craig Tiley was coaching John Lafney Diago, who was another South African. And I was looking to play doubles at qualies of the US Open, and I couldn't find anyone. And I saw Craig standing in the player area, and I went up to him and I said, "Hey, CT, is John Lafney around?" And he said, "Actually, he's not. He's playing Huggy Bear," which was a very famous pro-am event that the guys played in the Hamptons, where you could win a lot of money.
Nice.
And he was up there. He had lost, but he was hanging out with all the hot shots there in the Hamptons. I said, "Please phone him and see if he wants to play qualies. Just tell him it's me, and I'm desperate to play." I lost in qualies of the US Open and singles, and I was really at a crossroads in my career. Anyway, he phones him up, and he was going to stay there and not even play qualies. And he said, "Okay, because it's Robbie, I'll come down and I'll play with him." When I found out his ranking, Fabio, I realized that we were going to be the last guys in the qualies. There was about 5 minutes remaining. So I decided not to sign us in. And then with about 30 seconds, the tournament official, their good friend of ours, Mike Lou, said, "Any other sign-ins? This is going to be the last call before I rip the paper away." And I walk up there and I signed John Lafney and Robbie Koenig down there. And he pulls the paper away so nobody can switch. And, that was a big turning point in my career because we end up qualifying that year and we make the quarterfinals right off the bat. So in 10 days, I make more money playing doubles than I do, playing singles for the previous 8 months. And that really was the tipping point in my career to say, hey, you're not cutting it in singles. Doubles is very much suited to my serve and volley game. And yeah, I had a decent career playing doubles. Loved every minute of it. Loved being on the tour. Loved the traveling. Just loved mixing it. Being in the same locker rooms with some of the best singles players. And it was an absolute ball. I loved every bit of it. If I could have done it till I was 65 and retired, I would have, Fabio.
And you got to quite a few slam semis, so it was quite a good run. Which match, be it singles or doubles, stands out the most for you?
The wins stand out always. Won a couple of titles, 5 in total. But probably the match was actually the following year at the US Open, 1998. We played the quarterfinals. It was the old grandstand court back then. And the day before, Kuchera was playing Agassi, and I don't know if you remember the match, but Kuchera was down 2-0 and he started moonballing Agassi, and the crowd was going nuts at him, and he wins the third set, but then rain intervenes and they have to come back the next day. Just so happens our quarterfinals of our doubles was put on that court before them. So, you've got Armstrong absolutely packed to capacity, not because they're watching us, because they're waiting for the next match, the resumption of Agassi and Kuchera. And they were so hostile. It was unbelievable. It was a typical New York crowd. I was the smallest guy on the court with these 3 other giants on the court with me. And I think they felt pity on me. So we had a lot of crowd support, and it was just a huge atmosphere to be part of. And we're playing other South Africans. We're playing Neil Broad and Petey Norville. So there was a bit of niggle there. And anyway, we ended up winning. And I just remember the feeling. I'd worked out in my head that the amount of prize money that we were going to win was going to be the deposit on a flat that I was keeping my eye on in the Wimbledon area of London.
Oh, nice.
Just the first thing that went through my head when we won is, yes, I can afford that flat in London now. I'm going to take this prize money and put that down as my deposit in my flat. And Cool memories. I remember it till this day so vividly. Eh?
Do you still have the flat?
I still have the flat, man, and it's been the best investment I ever made. So it's multiplied in many ways.
That's great. So no wonder that's your best match, one of your favorite matches. That's brilliant. That's really good. It's good. I'm sure it's unbelievable to have a base at Wimbledon. Every time you go back, you've no stress. You can just chill out. You're not paying crazy prices. And is it actually very near the courts?
Yeah, it's 100-meter walk from the courts, if that. So you say that there's no stress,
Brilliant.
but you know what it's like. The family want to come over, and then the in-laws, and then your own family. So by the time the tournament starts, in a 2-bedroom apartment, you've got about 8 people staying with you.
And you're probably in a hotel.
Exactly.
You've signed yourself into a hotel. That's great. It's good to hear that story where, I'm sure you felt pressure in those matches as well, where, the money was good and each round was a lot more money. And then all of a sudden you're here, okay, if we win this, it's a deposit on this apartment. And dealing with that pressure has its own challenges as well. No different to players now who it's so much about money, isn't it?
Well, of course. And anybody who says it's not about money is talking absolute nonsense. My response to that is always, well, then play for free. Don't take the prize money, donate it to a charity. Or if it's an appearance fee and it's not about the money, well, don't take the appearance fee. Do the tournament a favor and show up and play for free. So I never buy that argument. It's all good and well when you've made millions and you're financially secure, but certainly for somebody like me, you do think about it on a regular basis. And, you don't always think of it all the time, but certainly in big matches, it was, you were aware of the fact that there was a lot on the line.
Yeah, no, I'd say it is. And look, for most players, it's only the 1% who are the top 10%, not even. So it's pressure. Speaking of giving money to charity, I only came across this the other day. Marcus Daniel he set up a new charity and he's given 10% of his prize money to charity. And I saw Tsitsipas does the same now.
I didn't know that. And again, the fact that it's come from a much lower ranked player like Marcus, in fact, I commented on that when the ATP made the press release. What a class act, to be able to give out of abundance is one thing, but certainly when you're a lower ranked player and you're doing it out of the goodness of your heart and, as a percentage of the money you make, it's probably a good chunk, right? Relatively speaking. I got so much respect for that. So much respect.
It's good. I'll try get him on the show. He's a nice guy and high impact athletes. That's what I think his charity is called, where they encourage this. And it's good to see Tsitsipas involved as well, because for the guys earning a lot of money, 10% is a big chunk.
Yeah.
And for the rest of their career, it's a big commitment.
I want to give tennis players a lot of props for the most part. Remember last year how much money the guys made here in Australia for the bushfire. I think that was around $6 million. Rafa and Roger put in $250,000. So tennis players are good like that. They've been really good at, if something's needed to be done, they will put on an exhibition match or do whatever they can do to play their part. So big props to my tennis boys.
They're good. So when did you quit the tour?
2005 was my last year. I played doubles for the last 7 months of the year with Thomas Johansson, the Swedish Grand Slam winner, which was so much fun. And he said to me, he was still a top singles player at the time, and he said, Robbie, if you want to carry on, I'm happy to play with you wherever we get in and, as much as you want to play, which was so tempting for me. But I also had a coaching offer from Mahesh Bhupathi and Wesley Moody. They were playing doubles together. Wesley was playing singles, and they offered to bring me on board, which I committed to. And, I was thinking, well, maybe I should play doubles. But it's amazing how things work out, Fabio, because just 2 months into the tennis season, I don't know if you remember the incident, but the one match in Rotterdam, before their match, Thomas and Marin Cilic were warming up, and they were serving cross-court, not to one another, but to their respective coaches. And Cilic ends up mishitting a serve, and it hits Thomas in the eye and it tears his cornea. And he ends up being out of tennis for, a substantial period of time. And, that would have been, from a selfish point of view, that would have been my doubles partner on the sidelines. And I would have been kind of left stranded. And who knows if things would have unfolded the way they did for me. So it was lucky that I had the coaching job. And, so I did that for a year before I got the television gig, which actually happened as a result of Wesley Moody after Wimbledon saying to me that he didn't want to work with me anymore. So suddenly, here was me left in limbo, and I was only Mahesh and myself. And that's when I understood the coaching roundabout, and that, one day you're hot, the next day you're not. And actually prior to that, I'd had a chance meeting walking from my flat in London to the Southfields tube station with Jason Goodall. Jason lived just up the road from me, and I didn't know that. We'd known each other a little bit because he used to run Tim Henman's website. But I happened to be going to the station. He was coming back from the station, and this was in about February, March. And, hey, what are you doing, Robbie? Hey, what are you doing, Jason? And I said, no, I'm coaching. And he goes, no, I'm working for the World Feed, ATP Media. I've grouped all the Masters 1000s together, and I commentate for them. I said, oh, that's awesome. And he says to me, would you be interested in commentating? I said, well, no, not really. I've got this coaching gig. I'm pretty happy with that for now. And he said, well, if you're at the tournaments and, you've got some spare time, why don't you pop up to the booth? We're always looking for guys to help us out because we're working such long hours. There's only me and John Barrett for the most part. Think about it. So it just so happened that in Indian Wells and Miami, I got finished the coaching with the boys a little earlier. So I sent him a message. He said, come up in, whatever, an hour's time and do this match. So I went up there and I did a set here or there. I did a match here or there at Indian Wells in Miami. Same in Rome. I think it was Hamburg back in those days. Did a little bit there. And of course, after Wimbledon, I was down to one player. So suddenly that conversation that I'd had with Jason early on in the year about commentating was a little bit more at the forefront of my thoughts now. And then we go to the US summer, and I do one or two matches during Cincinnati. And that's when the head of production there, Steve Plaster, says to me, Robbie, hey, we really like your content. We really like your work. Do you want to join us next year and work for ATP Media? So we had a quick negotiation there right in the players' lounge, as to how much I was going to get paid. And I love the security of the job. And I said to Mahesh, look, I'm going to take up this job next year. I've committed to doing commentary. So thanks to an absolute chance meeting with Jason Goodall on the corner of the street in Wimbledon, I got into commentary.
All down to that apartment.
Yes.
Yeah, it all links to that one match. Yeah, that's brilliant. So you've been commentating ever since. And tell me, did you have some of when you first started commentating, did you have some of the great quotes back then? Were you livening up? Were you adding a bit of action to the commentary?
Not really. It was only once I'd been in the game for probably 2 or 3 years, maybe even longer, 4 or 5 years, that when you start to listen to highlight clips of yourself commentating, and that's generally what started to go out on social media, on highlights reels, on news networks, did I find myself describing good points exactly the same way. Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, that's an unreal shot. Oh, that's fantastic serve. Oh, that's a fantastic forehand on the run. That's a phenomenal. And then there's no, there was no use of different adjectives. So I thought, hang on, sport by nature is repetitive. Quite often, what content that people consume the most is often the highlights packages. So I'm going to have to think of different ways of describing the same thing, 20, 30 different ways. And that's when I started to get the idea of, just being more versatile as a commentator. And, you start to make a list of things that you memorize and you add into your commentary, and that list gets longer with great quotes that you read, or something I pick up in a book that I'm reading, or it's a Sports Illustrated article that I've read. And sometimes it's from other sports that I'll put a nuance on that to make it tennis specific. And then that kind of became my thing as a commentator. Social media latched onto it, kind of helped my profile get better, and I became known as that guy that has the one-liners and the funny quotes. So
I think it's great for you. I think obviously you've the South African accent, which is a bit different to what you're used to. And then you have to, I have some of your adjectives here, like suffocates you to death. There's a ticket to the party. That's just an oil painting. There's a few more. It's tennis near the gods. No mortal may approach. They're really good. Obviously, you say them a lot better than I do. There's no intensity here. Mentally's a fortress. Like a mongoose on amphetamines. And obviously there's your popular one. You're going to have to, maybe you can tell me here, ooh, stop it.
Yeah. Oh, stop it.
There you go. That's brilliant. And I even see Mark Petchy's trying to, I think, take you on in your own game recently.
You'll have to ask Petch that. Yeah. I mean, those Essex boys, you can never trust them, hey?
No, he has. I don't have them offhand there, but he's definitely come up with some classics himself. He's been doing a good job with them, and I think it's only really in the past year and a half. We actually had him on the podcast early on when we first launched. He was great, but I never got the question. Maybe if I get him back on here, I'll question him on it. But no, there's some really good classics. I look forward to hearing new ones.
No, thanks. I've been working on a couple during the off season, so I'll have to get them in there without crowbarring them in. Sometimes you have a couple, but you don't want to just crowbar them in because then it doesn't sound good, right? You've got to wait for the right moment. Sometimes it's a line that I feel like I can only use for a specific player. I think one of my favorites in the early days was on David Ferrer, and I described him like a walking Red Bull, because that was exactly the image for me that was David Ferrer, right? The guy was just like he was constantly on the stuff. And I enjoy using that one when he played. And for me, that one was reserved for him and for him alone, you know.
Brilliant. Each player has their own. What's Rafa's one? Do you have any offhand? What's your number one?
Yeah, Phenomenal.
Okay, I've heard that one. What about Djokovic?
I probably couldn't say it on air, but I might get away with it saying it on your podcast. And if I could use it, I would, but I might lose my job. But I'll share it with you. No vacking way.
You probably get away with that now on Amazon. Not on BBC, but on Amazon you might get away with that. And what about Federer?
Federer, I think the one that became so synonymous with him was like a mongoose on amphetamines. He made a ridiculous reflex volley. I think it was against Jocko in a match. And I used that one, and that one kind of went viral because the point was so good and the commentary was a little bit out there. And then I think that resonated with a couple of the tennis fans. So that stuck with Roger. Nothing specific, not a word that Federer just seems to be getting betterer. That was another one when that, I don't know if you remember when that line of clothing was coming out, kind of got it off that. Yeah, I try and see what advertising is getting done by some of the sponsors and see if we can work something. I think the other one for Fed was waving his Wilson wand.
The Wilson wand, nice. What about Andy Murray? We can't not mention him.
Miraculous was the one I used.
Oh, nice.
It wasn't as good as the other ones, but I loved commentating on Andy. I watched him from a very young age, so I remember playing against him when he must have been about 15 at Nottingham. He got a wild card in dubs. So for me, that's been one of my favorite guys to watch because I was there in the very beginning and watched his career unfold. So,
and how did that match go?
I know we won it. We won it only because Andy's partner let him down so much. Martin Lee, shout out to Marty. Come on, Marty. What happened that day, man? I remember we were focusing all our attention on this 15-year-old kid, so we just thought that we'd stare at him, we'd try and intimidate him in the dubs. But, I mean, even back then, Fabio, you could see the return of serve was a joke. The hand-eye coordination, every time I tried to cross. My partner, Chris Haggard, had the sneaky lefty serve on a grass court. So Andy was just picking me off. If I was crossing, he was going down my line. When I faked, he just glued the return to Chris's shoelaces. And then eventually we were down 4-1 in the first set. We thought, hang on, let's just start plugging Martin Lee a bit more because we actually want to stay away from this kid. We ended up beating them, I think, like 6-4. And I remember saying to Judy after the match, I said, Jesus, if this kid of yours, keeps doing his thing, he could be a really good player one day. And she always reminds me about it and says, hey, Robbie, you turned out all right, didn't he? And I said, too true, Judy.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know if he'll make it down to Australia now. He'll be missed considering he was eager, and I heard he was putting in a good training session. He'd been playing well and moving well, and so that's unfortunate what happened to him. But hopefully, you never know. I don't know if he'll make it down or not, but hopefully he does. So tell me, Robbie, what is your favourite slam to commentate on pre-COVID?
The cliches are so true. They're all so different. They are so different. But, I mean, Wimbledon will always have a special place in my heart. Growing up as a youngster, we only got to see a couple of tennis matches, let alone events, tennis matches a year. And those were Wimbledon, the Borg-McEnroe finals in the early 80s, semis and finals. That was like the only thing that we got on our television. So Wimbledon holds a special place in my heart. And, of course, staying and living next door to the club for so many years was also very cool. But let me tell you what, the Australian Open has become one heck of a tournament. It is unbelievable what they've done. And I like everything I can do around it as well. There's some amazing golf courses down here. So, on days when I have evening matches, Fabio, I'll sneak out to some of these unbelievable courses on the Sandbelt and get to play one of my favorite golf courses in the world, Kingston Heath. I know a few of the members there now, and we hook up, we play some games there. I think it's Victoria. That's another unbelievable one. Royal Melbourne's not too bad either. It gets top 10 in the world. So you've got all these other things that you can do around the tournament. I love the coffee culture here in Australia. And quite often, I like to holiday in New Zealand before I come to this tournament. So it's like the whole trip is such a feel-good trip for me. And it's right up there. And then New York, I mean, who doesn't love New York for 2 weeks of the year? The electricity that event has. So, those three are right up there. The French is... probably lower down in the pecking order, probably because I was so rubbish on clay, and the feel-good factor at Roland Garros was a lot lower than the other three.
Nightmares. Do you still play any tennis? Like, let's say you get your half day off, or would you go down to Kooyong and hit a few balls on the grass?
No, I've been bad like that. I haven't hit at Kooyong, and I'd love to. In fact, Nick Lester, who's not here this year, but he's been here in previous years, Nick's always telling me, come on, let's head on down. But if it's a 50-50 decision between playing tennis and golf, normally golf wins. But I do enjoy still playing. I've got a young son who's playing tennis now, and he hits a good ball. In fact, I got a text message through just 5 minutes ago to say I'd won another Grade 5 event. So big props to my boy back at home for winning another ITF event. And he keeps me fit, Fabio. We hit balls. Obviously, we butt heads every now and then as father and son. Coach and dad is not easy, man. I tell you what. So I still love hitting balls. And if I have a few good workouts over the course of a week, you realize what a great sport tennis is for fitness, because my body hurts. You realize how many muscles you use playing this game.
You use your whole body completely. And has commentating made you a better coach?
1,000,000 times. 1,000,000 times. I wish I could. I would love to coach a top player simply because of the knowledge I've been able to accumulate, really from a neutral position in the commentary box, right? You've got no affinity to that guy down on the court. It's not like it's your son or the person you're coaching. So I always think I view the match with neutral eyes. And then over the years, you've been able to get all this Hawkeye analysis. World Feed used to get it long before any of the networks when I was working for ATP Media. So given so much information, so much of which doesn't go to air, but we get fed anyway in case we want to use it in a match. And it's been phenomenal. And you actually start to realize that tennis can be quite a simple game. With as much analysis as you get, I think it's important that you don't overanalyze things, because I think you get paralysis with that analysis if you try and give too much. But without a doubt, I think would really help me in a coaching capacity, because I think I get on quite well with people. It's always been part of my nature. I love people. So I think the communication bit is easier for me, but it's just really building up that bank of knowledge through commentary that has helped me immensely.
Nice. That's great to hear. And maybe if you go back to coaching, you still lose that job security that you have right now. You need to keep both roles. Now, be interested. It'd be great for you to try that, and I'd love to see you do it and see how all that experience would play off, and see you in the players' box and doing all that. But we're going to end this soon here, so you can get back to your daily routine, Robbie. But one of my questions for you is, if somebody wants to get into commentary, tennis commentary, how vital is it that, or maybe how vital is not the right way of asking it, but is it really necessary that they have to have played at a pro level, at a high level?
No, is the immediate answer. But I would say in broadcasting more and more these days, the old school kind of broadcaster who has studied journalism and is trying to find their way in the commentary world, it's becoming tougher and tougher for them to get gigs, because I would say that more and more broadcasters are prepared to take punts on ex-players and basically coach them into the role and mentor them into the role. Obviously, you've got to be able to speak well, you've got to be articulate, you've got to be able to deliver to some sort of a degree. And then I think that can be worked on, over time. You look across all sports, Fabio, and it's becoming really difficult for the old type of broadcaster to get into sports commentary these days.
Yeah, I don't, looking at it from the outside, I think it's always an advantage when a player has experience, when you can recall. I remember when I was in the semis, or some players, were in the finals or did well. I know Amazon Prime have some great commentators on. I think it adds, the viewer gets a little bit more knowledge, a bit of in-depth what really goes on there. So that's where I think it makes it harder for somebody who doesn't have that vast tennis experience to jump in there and get the job.
Yeah, what I will say to you is, though, you have to be able to communicate that knowledge, and that's key. It's one thing having the knowledge, but if you can't get that message across, in 25 seconds, be it in between points or, quick and succinctly, certainly in our game, you are going to struggle. So you can have, like I say, you can have all the experience you want, you can have lived through all the experiences, but if you can't communicate that to the viewer, it's actually useless, right?
Agree. That is just because of experience doesn't mean you can do the job. That's interesting. So that wasn't for me, that question, by the way. I was just curious of it. Commentating, I don't know, would be for me. It'd be interesting. But how is it traveling? Like, obviously coaching gets more difficult, I think, as you get older with your family. It's been away from so many weeks to year. How do you cope with that?
The commentary is so much better because it's so much more structured. I know exactly the day I'm leaving, Fabio, and the day that I'm going to get back from any gig. And, I've put in the hard yards 14 years before my schedule is finally about as good as I could possibly want. I'm doing exactly the events that I'd like to do. So I'm in a very, very fortunate position, and I count my blessings every day. So from a family perspective, the balance is right. I do, enough weeks of the year that I can make enough money, but I have enough weeks off whereby I can spend quality time with my family. And that's the beautiful part of it. I'll work anywhere between 22 to 24 weeks a year. And people go, oh, it's a lot. You're away from your family half the year. But when I'm home, I'm home. When I'm home, I don't work.
Nice.
My riposte to them is, well, how many other people out there get 28 weeks holiday a year?
Not many.
That gives them perspective, and they're like, wow. And I say, don't forget, I get to do something that I absolutely love. And I've been commentating in a generation when we've had three of the greatest players to ever play the sport on the men's side. And on the women's side, we've probably got one of the greatest players as well in Serena Williams. So, I've been at the forefront of this incredible tennis era, and I've Yeah, to be front and center has just been incredible.
It's been great. And finally, last question is, when we see in Dublin on one of the great golf courses?
Oh man, listen, Royal County Down is top of the list. Your country is so beautiful. In many ways, it reminds me from the pictures that I've seen of New Zealand, and that's one of my favorite countries in the world. I'm a big fisherman, so if I can bring my fishing rod and my golf clubs, you guys might end up having me there a lot longer than you'd want. But I can't wait to come.
We just need a Masters. We just need a Masters event. We get on Casey. He's quite a good golfer. We get him out and you can do a duel.
Well, I tell you what, if you can organize a commentary gig, even for a challenger there, I'll come over for that as long as you can tag on some of the other stuff on that. Then it's a great quid pro quo deal done.
We'll do the functional tennis 2K challenger. But Robbie, thank you very much. It was really, really enjoyed that. Thanks a lot. Hope you rest your quarantine goes great, and can't wait to hear you on Amazon with some of your great quotes. Really looking forward to them. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Fabio, and thanks for sharing so many tennis stories on functional tennis, man. I've thoroughly enjoyed listening to some of them. Top man.
What a really, really nice guy Robbie is. I really enjoyed that chat. Hope you did too. I'm looking forward to tennis now, back on ATP Cup and Aussie Open, and hearing Robbie come up with some of his classics. Really looking forward to that. But I'll be back on the podcast maybe sooner than our weekly episode. We're trying to line up some extra episodes now with the busy tennis season kicking off. But until the next episode, goodbye. Try and get out there and play some tennis, and take care. Bye.